Hey, I'm Chase, Community Manager at Sorcery Contested Realm, and today we're going through the submissions for the Design-A-Card contest in the Facebook group. Now, of course, I'm joined by our design team. We've got Sean, Rafa, and Mike. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'm really excited to talk through some of the submissions we have here. Now, before we jump in, I just want to be really clear about the purpose of this. This was all inspired by Eric's Realm Eater card, where he made his own custom cards, and we had to showcase those in our gameplay. We wanted to see the community's creativity unleashed, and so we invited people in the Facebook group to share their own custom spells and atlas cards. And the winners, we're going to choose 6 out of the over 140 cards that were submitted. We're going to choose six spells, 6 atlas sites, and they're going to receive a blank sample card, which maybe they could fill with their own custom card creation. Now, there's a few little things we want to go through before we get started. Number one, we had so many great submissions. We would have loved to reward them all, but at this time, that's not feasible. So we've picked some of our favorites to talk through and give some insight into design, reveal at the end of this video who is going to receive the rewards. The second thing is Eric's Curiosa is under no obligation to use the submissions in Sorcery in the future, and any future similarities are purely by coincidence. And really, this is just all about fun. So we want to engage with you guys, have some fun, and then get the design team to show a little bit of a window into their thought process and give some feedback about the cards that they picked. So with that huge disclaimer out of the way, let's jump in here and take a look at some of the spells that were shared. And let's start off with one of my favorites here. But Sean, can you talk about the Roly-Poly Armadillo? What stood out about this card to you?
Yeah, sure. I guess one of the first things that I was looking for as I was going through submissions was anything that deals with movement through the grid. Because it's something that's so unique to Sorcery, it was kind of the first thing that, in one of my first passes, I was checking for cards that did stuff with that. And this one in particular just has like a really awesome combination of some humor perfectly matching the gameplay, and then the artwork kind of selling that as well. So you get this Roly-Poly Armadillo who can tap to curl up into a ball and start scuttling around the realm, which sounds really fun.
So one thing I have actually a question for all of you as designers. One of the things that's really important about Sorcery is the elemental theme, right? And some of the themes maybe stress movement more than others. Is it ever particularly challenging to work in certain types of mechanics based on the threshold of an element? Like, Earth is maybe not necessarily known for movement. And does this play into that well, or pose some thematic challenges by being a Roly-Poly Armadillo?
It's maybe one of the aspects of this card that isn't quite perfect, right? Because as you say, it's quite a big movement ability that would maybe feel a bit more at home in fire or air, but of course being sold in this case through a very earthy beast, which kind of makes up for that elemental dissonance.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that is kind of fun about having those elemental kind of restrictions, and well, at least that framework to work with is the exceptions become kind of fun, right? Like you get something that you wouldn't normally get when it really, really needs to be kind of a little bit different. And this Roly-Poly fits that to a T, right? Like you have this idea of this heavily armored thing that like a lot of other Earth things, is tough and stuff like that, but it has this kind of quirk to it, which is kind of this ability to kind of move and kind of use the grid system, which is another thing that I like to look for in these things, where it's like this is kind of unusual for Earth, but it kind of shines a pretty interesting spotlight on it to highlight that distinction, which I think is fun. So I like the being able to subvert the normal stuff with stuff like this. This is a great one.
And a beautiful art as well. Yep. But speaking of subverting things, let's move on to the Holy Grenade. Now I love the also good art in a sort of a different, little more simplistic way. Maybe Mike, could you speak on behalf of this card submission?
Yeah, this is a great one. This one goes to my point earlier about using the grid in kind of a fun way. This is a great relic. It's got some great throwbacks to one of my favorite movies, and so you have a lot of kind of tie-ins, kind of like nostalgic tie-ins, but also that cross-shaped grid is just it's perfect.
So good.
It's chef's kiss, and it's great that our grid can handle a shape like that, and then you can actually interpret it in a fun way like this. The other slight little nod to it is the number 3. So you got this whole Trinity thing going on where the core of the cross has a 3, then you've got 2s and 1. So there's a lot of like religious kind of symbolism stuck in there, but also in kind of a lighthearted, fun way. So I picked this one specifically for digging into the humor, but also the grid system. It was a great combination.
Yeah, that one was one of my top picks too, for basically the same reasons. Just like the grid is such a cool part of the game, and I know a lot of people really appreciate the little grid on the card's text box ability. And this one is just like double down on the fun part of the game in a hilarious way, and it's still like it's great too because it's kind of doing this one-time effect, which usually like Magic does. But it's doing in something that reminds us of like potions and so on, which usually work that way, but in such a like cool way that plays to the grid and also becomes relevant depending on who is handling the Holy Grenade.
Yeah.
So it's a card that like it's kind of straightforward in a sense, but it also can play differently depending on the scenario. So yeah,
really it's got a great type line. It's got a great type line too. Elite Relic. Of the right hand, right? Like it's just like, again, just all the layers. It's good.
Yeah.
Now, I think getting to peek in behind the curtain and seeing the design process that you go through a lot, I feel like together you are like the perfect trio here of covering your bases and bringing different things to the table. Does any one of you feel like you're particularly adept at doing the type line? Is that somewhere that, people find to be a particular calling?
Let's see if I can. Nope, this way. I can't point. There we go.
I've written a few.
Oh, Sean, the pipeline whisperer. Wow.
Yeah.
You'll see them later this year when Arthurian Legends rolls out.
It's one of those. It's one of the card aspects that I think it's maybe not as much sunlight as the actual art and the effect and everything like that, but that type line is super important. It means not only does it have gameplay data in it, but it also really shows the personality and the humor of the team. So if you look at a lot of the alpha and the beta type lines, you'll see a lot of Eric jokes, a lot of Nick jokes, a lot of Rafa jokes. Like they're coming through those type lines, and I'm very excited to get the next batch out because there's a whole bunch more great little type lines to come up. But this I really quite enjoy the type lines.
Just sometimes it's the only opportunity you have to put kind of flavor text on a card if they've got a decent length ability or something you can't fit flavor text in the regular spot. You've always got the type line there to kind of fill in some narrative gaps, maybe.
Yeah,
I feel like it really speaks to the cards. I think you're right. It is sometimes underrepresented, but I imagine people pulling up cards and being like, "Oh, I love this card," and the first thing they do is they say the name and then they read the type line out loud, right? They're like, "Oh, look at that!" And such a key part. Well, speaking more on the mechanical side, let's jump over the next card here, the Gateway to Nawia.
This is somewhat straightforward, like very short ability, which is also a good thing. So like easy to remember, iconic. Also super fitting to air, right? So there are a lot of nice things about the card, but it's actually one that I got very close to just cutting at some point in my picking my favorite cards process. But after giving it more thought, it's like, okay, wait, there's more here than meets the eye even. And then what I realized that not only you have some of the more straightforward things where you can, you're turning that subsurface into void, and then naturally killing things there that now can't really survive in that hazardous environment. But it also creates that little void pocket that, differently from how it works in the game, is actually potentially very central. And and that's now a new location that you can deploy your Voidwalk minions from. You can do like ghost ship shenanigans, where now ghost ships are deploying new like undead and spirits there right into enemy territory, and just like a lot of really I don't kind of hidden interactions that I didn't really catch initially. But after thinking more about it, okay, that's really cool, right? It's like it's a flexible card. It can actually achieve and it can do multiple things. And again, just super well designed and clean. So yeah.
You had mentioned something that I hadn't thought of at first, with maybe interactions with water sites and flooding and submerging things on them.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the thing, right? So since that location is now like the void, and no longer like the underground region or the underwater region, it can like instantly kill things when you actually conjure the aura. But even later on, right? So if you're mixing that with a different element like earth or maybe water, where you get all those like earth berry effects and like those drown effects, now it can not only kill those minions when they enter the subsurface, but they just get banished because they're now fundamentally entering the void. And even stuff, I have bury, I have submerge, my friend, that won't help you because they're just being sent back to the void,
Oh, fantastic. Well, and let's move on to this one. I really like the art on this one too. A little creepy. The ego homoculi. Sean, why don't you talk us through this unique automaton?
Yeah, a fan of the creepy artwork as well myself. Yeah, again, kind of speaks to something that Rafa touched on, with having just kind of a simple, quite iconic ability where it's kind of explained very quickly. But the mechanical implications here are quite far-reaching. Anything that has to do with your avatar and extending or enhancing their strengths and their powers, obviously is going to function completely differently in every deck, which can be really, really interesting. And obviously, a good bit of mechanical foresight here to disallow them from being able to play additional sites, because that can be quite dangerous.
Get out of hands rather quickly.
Yeah, but the theme here as well of you, the avatar, creating a kind of rudimentary copy of yourself is kind of a cool narrative to add to the game as well.
Yeah.
And let's move on to the superstitious Moleman. Mike, you wanna speak to this one? I feel like we had some good chuckles about that.
This is, I love this one. Not only is the art just on point. Again, like art doesn't have to be, gorgeous paint strokes. Sometimes it's all in a facial expression, and these facial expressions are they're so good. And they've layered in a bunch of those kind of good luck, bad luck kind of vibes and stuff like that, which is just it's so cool. Also, the fact that, again, going back to my earlier point about tying it to the grid, this is something that we can do with the grid, right? Like, not a lot of games can do this kind of thing where they're just like, you know what, site number 13 or square number 13 is just, we won't go there. And it just kind of creates a really fun, kind of funny interaction, which may or may not actually, be of importance to the game, but just the fact that it's there is just great. So again, they're fun. They have burrowing, of course, because they're molemen, and so like it's a funny concept that's been brought to life within our system, and I appreciate this card.
I almost feel like the art is like kind of perfect as is. Like, I don't know about it. Like,
yeah. If I was going to commission an artist, I would, just take this sketch and send it off. Like, hey,
I'll also
get it close to this.
I'll also draw attention to the type line here, with it, a bit of a earth pun, talking about these exceptional diggers with groundless beliefs.
Oh,
it's like, yeah, well done.
Yep.
Like this card is almost like too permanent. Like it's like they're super into Earth, like triple Earth threshold, right? Like all their suspicions and so on. But also really funny that like 13 kind of being in the middle is actually relevant gameplay wise, but that could also swap depending on which side you're sitting. So there's this casual kitchen table vibe to it. It's like everywhere. It's glorious.
So that's a really great point, because it adds like an asymmetrical component, right? Where it's like depending on where you sit or which side you're on, it would change. How often do you feel like that? Is that something you worry about, or have to really commit a lot of thought to when designing cards? Do you generally try to avoid that, or is it just fun and it works?
I think it's definitely something we're aware of, and there might have been something not like too long ago, like a situation where it's like, oh, wait a second, this kind of is broken this way, but like it doesn't work. Like just like something a little problematic like that. But this is one where I'd be very comfortable, because just like we do take into account that there are different players, right, and people that want different things and want to experience the game differently. So that one, I think, is like it's not like a huge imbalance at the end of the day. So as long as it fits the vibe of the card, and it's not doing getting to levels of like, that just doesn't work, then I think we're comfortable printing something like that.
Well, Rafa, I've got you talking here. Let's talk about the Aqua Salamander.
This one, so this one is actually adorable. I'll start by saying that. But honestly, like I love the art. It's actually super cute, but also super sweet, clean design. Like and honestly, like really cool that someone kind of looked, I believe so, at lava salamanders. Like, okay, how would water kind of tackle the salamander matter, right? And I think that was so well done, like super well. I like maybe tweak a couple of numbers here and there, maybe like one word or two, and you could just print that. You could just have that in a set. It's that good, and it also highlights a little bit of the core identity that each element has. We're like, okay, fire wants to do spell casting, so like fire salamander, fire spell cast, or shooting projectiles left and right, while water is playing this more like sort of defensive, maybe value game, and nothing like Aqua Salamander that can basically, as long as it's in your body of water, they're kind of just live forever and chump block a lot of times, I guess. So but really sweet design. I really like this one.
Shark bait.
I really like I really like the art. It was really, like Rafa said, very adorable, and just looks it's perfect. Like we have like the precedent of the lava salamander, but like how could one be interpreted in the world of sorcery as the Aqua Salamander? I'm a big fan of axolotls, so like this is just fantastic.
And let's go and talk about the Martis Compass, a unique relic of way warping wonder.
Yeah, so it's no secret in the team that I'm a big nerd for nautical, all things piratical. So the fact that we've got a compass in here is it warms my heart. But the reason why I chose this one was, the second reason, I'll say. First of all, it's a compass, so it's got to go in. But the second reason, I quite like what this could do. There's a lot of things in the game are kind of restricted based on kind of forward and backwards and side to side. This allows you to kind of subvert that a little bit and kind of maybe do some kind of unsuspected things. The one thing that it pops instantly in my mind was my sedge crab army is now going to be able to march on the enemy, as opposed to just sticking in a straight back to front or side to side kind of motion. So there's some cool stuff that you could do with this. It allows you to take stuff that and use it in kind of unintended ways. It feels like it could be one of those compasses that kind of has kind of a magical influence on the world around it and kind of bend things and stuff like that. So I like this one. This was going to be an easy win for me.
Carries on that kind of game warping tradition of stuff like the Ethereum mechanism, right?
Yeah. We like this one. Like Mike said, it's one of those cards that, like, if you see that, it's like, okay, let me go back to my sorcery collection and reevaluate every single card. It's one of those cards. and it's a lot of fun. Just a lot of fun, and like Satch Crabs was exactly like immediately my mind went to that. Is like, okay, aggro crabs, let's go. Yeah, so much fun. I love this one. Yeah.
And let's move on then to what we all thought as children was going to be the major obstacle of our adult lives with quicksand. Turns out not a daily threat,
Yeah.
but perhaps it could be. So Sean, actually, why don't you talk to us about quicksand here?
Yeah, sure. Again, another just strong, simple theme. Like you said, it's a thematic or narrative thing that everybody kind of understands how it's supposed to work, at least in fiction. And then just kind of that story perfectly adapted onto the card. You've even got this kind of interaction built in there where it doesn't trigger until the start of your next turn, so your opponent maybe has a turn to pull someone out of the quicksand before they completely find themselves suffocated. So there's some cool stuff there. And that kind of counterplay of being able to drop an aura or something down to basically threaten something on the battlefield, but it actually is going to trigger later on, is an interesting mechanical thing that I know we've played around with ideas on similar things.
Yeah.
And also, one additional thing here is that one challenge that you can have when you're trying to mix those two specific elements, earth and water, is that like sometimes a lot of the good cards for those two elements, they don't quite function together. And this is a really, again, thematic way to approach a gameplay kind of challenge and issue that I thought was super clever and like Sean said, just super simple and awesome, right? Like even the timing aspect of the card, where like in a way it's almost like forced movement, which plays into Water's idea because they're kind of, I mean, it's basically move or die. So I guess that's a very compelling argument to force minions to move out of the quicksand area.
Not forced movement, but also just incentivized movement.
Incentivized
movement, yeah, very compelling. Yeah.
Encouraged.
Yeah.
But also just things like the way that it's an aura, so it enters play, it interacts with the realm, but also doesn't keep the board clogged with a lot of cards because it does eventually dispelled. So there's like very clean design, and also one thing like artwork wise that I love, like the little sword. And the person just, because also like one thing to keep in mind is that if it does get buried or, if it goes to the subsurface, it will carry its artifact. So there's even something to be learned there.
Yeah, it definitely has that Terminator 2 vibe.
Yeah.
Like it's like as you're kind of going down the. Which maybe we need to think about the second most obvious thing that was going to be a threat when we grew up, which was lava pits.
Robot from the future, but yeah.
Yeah, well, that too. Yeah.
We're talking about sites later, though, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to Big Swell. And Rafa, can you talk to us about what spoke to you about Big Swell?
I mean, look at that! Like it's that big fish and all its glory there. Kind of,
I love the boat.
Yeah, I mean, it's that one took me a little while to like. I had to honestly read a card a couple of times, which is not usually a good sign in terms of design. And after thinking about it for a while, I was like, okay, there's definitely some ways to make this more like cleaner and just like more simple and easy to parse and play. But the main idea or the core idea of the card is really, really sweet, which is playing into the whole like, okay, the subsurface region matters, right? Like having minions that are submerged, that matters, and positioning as well, where you can like surface and like move things around also plays really well into water as an element with like forced movement, minions with submerge. So it's kind of just a maybe clever way to maybe do something Riptide like. It's still in water, but it's slightly different and a little more difficult as well to play, like a little more complex. So which explains also the higher rarity there. So yeah,
it kind of gets around some of the speed issues or the slow nature of playing submerged minions, right? It's like, I played them submerged where they're safe, but it's going to take a while for them to actually get somewhere and do something. Now you've got reasons to play your submerged things so you can start comboing with them.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
I like that as doing a lot of water play. You look for those cards that let you surface at any particular time. A lot of stuff that lets you kind of move up and down and stuff like that. And so this card would be awesome for that, because you could kind of move out and then pop up, and then actually you force a bunch of stuff to relocate when you pop up. So it's good. Yeah.
So one thing you mentioned with this was that you might clean up the wording a little bit, right? And a lot of times when we're making cards, it starts in a rougher space and then it gets polished up as it goes. What are things that you try to keep in mind when you think about how you want to template text on a card to make it accessible but also clear? I know it's, sorcery, so much stuff can happen. It's really challenging. But what are some kind of things you keep in the front of your mind when you are trying to template a card like that?
I think like their design, just core design principles, like again, simple text, iconic text, right? Don't write like 2 walls of paragraph. So there's some basic principles like that. But on top of that, there's also like, okay, you read the card, it's like, okay, let me read this again. It's like maybe there's a detail that you keep missing. So we just try to kind of strive for perfection in that sense of like, make it easy for people, right? Like like you're saying, there's a lot of depth, a lot of complexity in the game already of like in the way the cards can interact with each other. So you don't need overly complicated cards. Just try to allow the game and the cards interactions to kind of create that higher complexity. So that would be like one of the things. We also like play a little bit into rarity. So like we're more comfortable having something that is higher rarity that might be a little more complex, while we would not maybe have something like that is super complicated at like ordinary rarity that a lot of beginner players might have to kind of interact. When you're drafting, see that same card like a lot of times, and then that's something that kind of catch people off guard a bit. So.
That's a great point.
Yeah, that's it's a good one, because I think we've got a lot of tools in our toolbox, but one of the best tools that we've got was when Eric came up with the frame, and it's a very small text frame. So game designers like to talk. We like to have big blocks of text to explain very simple things, but that little text box has been a blessing because it means that we get very, very precious about what we put in there. Sometimes that might mean that this card gets turned into 2 cards. And sometimes it might mean that the card gets simplified, or as Rafa was just saying, maybe it gets bumped up in rarity. So like something like a Doomsday Device is going to have a huge block of text. When you see those huge block of text, we want that to mean something. We want that to communicate to the player, like, pay attention, this is going to get weird. And
it's got to be worthwhile reading that whole block, right? It's got to have a big enough impact that the effort is there.
Exactly.
That's a phrase that I use next time I teach a sorcery game, though. Pay attention, this is going to get weird.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we love about it. But we want to make sure that we default to simple reads. And one of the it's a standard that I keep in my head. It's not always possible, but I like it when people can read a card just one time and walk away with knowing how to use it. And so if you get people kind of like looking at a card and you can see that they're reading it a couple of times, that's a red flag for me. I'll be like, okay, hang on. There's something in there that's kind of that they're not quite it's not quite clicking with them. So can we make it a little bit easier, a little bit smoother? So we always do that a lot in our design discussions about how to focus the card a little bit more. Oftentimes there's like 2 ideas kind of fighting for the same space, and it's just about trying to figure out which of those swallows the other.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the electric eel, and an exceptional eel tingles your toesies. Sean, why don't you champion this one?
I liked this one in particular because it's actually something that we've talked about a little bit today, which is kind of off-element things working in a different element, or like with the Aqua Salamander, like how would I adapt the Lava Salamander to fit in a different element? So like this electric eel is the ability is something that sounds very much like it would fit on a fire card, but this is an instance where, like, no, the theme going on here and the narrative being told is so perfectly water, of the electric eel showing up and dealing what would usually be fire kind of little bits of splash damage, is now the electric eel swimming around and putting out a small static charge and zapping everything, which is something, kind of an area of design that I like to look into, of going, okay, this element wants to be able to do this thing which is kind of off-brand. What is a really strong narrative reason or way that element would gain access to this thing? And so this is a really cool example of that. Like, if you're playing water and you really want to be able to do some of this kind of ping damage that is usually the realm of fire, like, you throw in an electric eel in there, and that's a perfectly watery way to achieve the same result.
Fantastic. Well, and then speaking of fantastic results here, we had a familiar name submit a card here that caught our eyes initially, not because of the submission, but of the design itself. Mike, maybe you could talk to us a little bit about garlic, this ordinary kitchen table relic.
Yeah, you find it in most Italian dishes. The card itself. It's this card really. It just was. It was all the great things. It's simple for a start. It's an ordinary. We didn't get a lot of ordinaries come through, so that always piques my interest when I see an ordinary come across the table. And then it's just got a real simple Genesis ability, which is things take a step away from the bearer. Like, it's like, whoa, that's a bit smelly. I'm gonna go this way. And then it's got that little added extra, which is a little bit of vampire hate, which is just perfect for from a thematic point of view. You would expect there to be something to do with vampires, and of course it was there. So everything that I expected to see of garlic was there. It was very simple. And it's the sort of thing that I would love to see more of in sorcery. Those kind of low yield but perfectly on point relics in future sets. So that for me. This really it felt humble, but also just had great impact from both a thematic point of view, but also from kind of a mechanical point of view as well. So again, using the grid and all sorts of stuff. So to me, it was firing on all cylinders. Because I think there's a huge bias pull for anyone who wants to create stuff that is in the to make something unique, to make something big and kind of flat and flashy. So when you sit down and you look at a relic and you're like, okay, cool, I'm going to do make the next Spear of Destiny or something like that, then it becomes really
device we just talked about,
raging, poisoning,
sort
of doom.
Yeah. But making ordinary stuff is hard. This was a really interesting kind of learning curve for us as a team. Like, ordinaries and exceptionals are a lot harder to design than elites and uniques. And so when we sit down to look at a new set of cards, we always think about, well, what are kind of like your kind of common, what could be those common items that the bread and butter stuff is important. And so how can we fill that space? We're very mindful of trying to make sure that we leave a bit of a space in each set for these kind of things.
Really important for like setting the scene and the kind of feeling of a set.
That's a great point.
And there's also there's a lot just going on when it's talks not only about ordinaries, because they show a lot in draft, right? So you need to have that limited play thing in mind, but also it's a relic, so every single element or every single deck could potentially run that. So how to find the right balance between everybody's going to see that a bazillion times, but also it can be too strong, but it can be too weak. There's a lot going on that makes some of those designs a bit challenging. But I think honestly, this one was so that one's great because again, forest movement is something that I think basically every deck can use, right, to some capacity, whether it's to disrupt their defenses or to maybe get an attacker like out of your territory, and also just the fact that some of the cost of the card is like in the Genesis ability, so you do get that benefit right away, and then there's like that kind of very flavorful thematic second ability to protect you from vampires, and also like as a side note, there's also something really cool about like the type line is like an ordinary kitchen table relic, and this card just like oozing like a kitchen table play. It's almost like, oh, I've been having a really hard time with Emperor Vampire, like in my play group. Let me design something real quick here. I love it. I love it. This is sorcery right there.
That's a really good point. Like it invokes that again using the type line to communicate something which is a little bit coded, right? But also like one last thing to kind of I guess point out with the Genesis ability is that it's all minions. So it's like one of the things that I like to do when we're designing cards, and I love doing this with Sean and Rafa because they're great people to do this with. But creating small scenarios in your head, like how does this scene play out, right? Like how does you've got like this. You got this vampire show up, and you get some crazy Leroy Jenkins type guy who's like, I got this, grabs a clove of garlic and just like like bites right into this garlic, and everyone's like, nope, I'll have none of that, and then everyone kind of like wanders away. Like you have like those kind of comical moments when we're designing cards. We do this quite often, actually. It's like visualizing what's happening here, and that actually it does a couple things. Like one it helps sell the humor, helps us understand what's the joke here that we're or a mood that we're trying to deliver isn't to be a joke, but also it also helps us focus on what's important with the mechanics to make sure that the mechanics are actually delivering on that. So if it was something like all nearby enemy minions have to take away a step from the bear, it's like, well, wait a minute, why would just the enemy not want to smell this guy's bad breath? I mean, his buddies wouldn't want to either. So maybe it might lead to a more open and cleaner card. Thinking about these humors or these stories.
Well, and a fantastic one. So we had all these great cards we talked about. Before we talk about the ones that are being selected to be winning the sample card and the honorable mentions, before we talk about that, what did it feel like as a designer getting to see all these cool ideas coming from the community? I know you guys have been working so hard on designing future sets. When you can take a second and pop your head up and see the community coming up with these ideas and sharing them, what was that like for you? Maybe Sean, could you start us off?
I think the funniest ones, especially because like we're now working on the set to follow Arthurian Legends, so there's quite a few cards we've had in it, roaming around in our heads that haven't been seen yet. And so going through these lists and like looking through stuff and recognizing elements of things that will maybe be appearing in the game in the next couple of years, kind of thing, that people are clearly have this this desire to see something that does that in the game, and being like, oh, okay, yeah, cool, we're all on the same page here.
Yeah, I think that's one of the strongest things about this competition is that it's been so validating. It's like it feels like people are with us on the ride, and it feels cool to let other people let their creativity show and enjoy doing what we do. That's kind of one of the things that I every time the card submission came through, I was very excited to see it, and it was a good it was a good connection with the community, and I hope they had a lot of fun doing it, because we certainly had fun reading through the ideas, and you could see that their creativity and their passion come through.
Yeah, it was. It was inspiring, and just seeing everybody's like enthusiasm and just like engagement was just awesome. Having to pick 6 favorites was maybe a bit challenging. I'll have to say it, but it was a ton of fun, and also just like it. It's hard to describe. Just like there's this. The vibe that the community is sort of like just, propagating, I guess, or I don't know if that's the right word, but
Embodying, or yeah.
yeah, it's just so great, and it reminds me of like just being a kid and just like having this board game or like playing D&D and just like making up stuff like on the spot, just like, oh, how are you going to solve this puzzle? Or how are you going to approach it? Oh, I'm going to do it this way. And just like, and just see the community gathering together around this event, this community contest, and fully embracing it. It's been very inspiring and invigorating, really.
I will say, from behind the scenes, the amount of time that was spent deliberating over these and looking through all 140 and making sure they all got like adequate time and discussion was really fun, and it was really hard for them to narrow these down. So there was not some tears, but it was some ones that were tough to see go. There were so many amazing submissions. Be sure to check out our link in the video description that will take you to the Facebook post where you can see the full list of community submissions in all of their glory. And we'll have an upcoming video where we take a look at the community's submissions for sites. So be sure to stay tuned for that video as well. But I think without further ado, let's move on. We'll talk about the final picks and the honorable mentions. So congratulations, Garlic, Roly Poly Armadillo, Holy Grenade, Ego Homoculi, and Gateway to Nawia, as well as Quicksand. You're the final picks for the spells for the Sorcery Design-A-Pick contest. We'll be reaching out to you over Facebook, so make sure to check your messages there. And a big congratulations to the honorable mention, Superstitious Moleman, Aqua Salamander, Electric Eel, Big Swell, and Mortis Compass. Those are fantastic designs as well as to everyone else who submitted spells for this contest. So congratulations, everybody. And in the meantime, best of luck contesting the realm.